because when push comes to shove, side-opening government believes that compromises have to be made to preserve a greater common good. And this debate, that common good, is the social thread of tolerance and integration within the Malaysian society. Let's make one thing clear from the get-go: OG will not attempt to establish that Malaysian Muslims are correct in their court ruling that stops the best ensure both communities' best interest is protected. We say that compromise should come from the only community that is able to make a compromise, in this case, the Malaysian Christians. Let's look at two things in this debate, those two things that I mentioned to you: the socio-political climate of Malaysia, and secondly, on the balance of cost. We think the priority of the Malaysian Christian community should be progressive.
Of nobody reporting me to the Malaysian government, I'm going to tell you why Christianity as a religion represents in this country. When you look at the way Malaysia works, right? The fact that government uses religion as a medium to control its society, as a medium to control discourse. We simply don't accept this characterization that religion is not political in Malaysia. Trust me, it is extremely political, precisely why politicians use dissents are being demonized. You realize that that's already status quo. Look at the trade-off. We think that if they concede to this not using the word of Allah or give up in the legal recourse, we think that the relationship that they have they have already come from a position of weakness. We think that this concession furthers the entitlement of Muslims, especially over the Christian religion. We think in any worse sense, we think that they could be further demonized because of the fact that they are now deemed as a weakness religion. Concession means you are wrong, which means that this gives ammunition to more of the Muslim conservatives to further demonize the religion. So we think that the trade-off here, if you do have that concession, you are further demonized, right? And most of her arguments, if you realize, are predicated upon the fact that, look, we need short-term peace. We tell you that we are willing to concede short-term harm if it leads
Not concede weakness, but show that they're willing to tolerate what is already the status quo.
In status quo, the Christian religion is inferior and is weak compared to the position of Muslim religion in society. Giving up that concession on something that you believe is so important gives and shows that position of weakness. Let's look into the first issue, right? We think that the Malaysian government uses religion to control and repress discourse, right? Especially when you look at the way government puts Muslim or the Islam religion as a priority. What it then does, and what the Malaysian government does, is it ensures that nobody questions the Muslim religion or nobody questions Muslim society. That's why you have dubious laws such as the ISA saying the rate of discourse, that you should go up against the government and question what they do, because us as Malaysian Christians, we are not going to back down, even if it is an important word to you. Precisely because of that, we are not going to do it, right?
Testing. Ladies and gentlemen, as a person, fighting for compromise and understanding is something really close to my heart. Several things we're going to talk about in this debate. Firstly, I'm going to talk about how compromise assists Christians in terms of political posturing, since you want to talk about it. I'm going to talk about also against her arguments over here, which mainly comes with a few rebuttals. But she's constantly dealt with my arguments early on how exactly we need to come to
take place if there's such a small minority. Their rights are being revoked. Their rights are being revoked away from them. So we don't see how this is the rationale or rationale within society itself and the discussion will be able to continue.
We agree that we should find constructive ways to remove oppressive policies. But this specific battle on the usage of the word Allah does you no favor in that particular discourse because of the asymmetry of influence and your antagonistic stance against something that's blasphemous for the majority.
The asymmetry of influence and the concession means that they aren't able to have a rational discussion. Their voices keep on getting stifled out. We find that to be highly problematic. So now, onto my first.
We are saying that they are choosing to not fight back, not that they are, not that they don't have a backbone, not that they are,
they're choosing not to fight. It doesn't show that they have a backbone. If you keep on applying this,
and therefore the reappropriation of the word Allah by the Christians is going to adversely affect the impression and the perception of the beliefs of the Muslims in and of itself. This is the stance that CG is going to take. But before that, let's clear up the opening houses, because what I got from site OO was basically the fact that, people, the Christians don't want to be in a position, will be in a position of weakness if they constantly compromise, and then they started talking about discourse. Let's tell you one thing first. We believe that the magnanimity is magnanimity is a powerful tool of diplomacy between religions, especially when it comes to secular countries where you have diametrically opposing religions coinciding in one place, right? And that's especially the case in Malaysia. We don't believe that it is strategic to position the Christians as a radical group of people who are not going to be receptive to any form of change or cultural tolerance, because it projects them in the light that they are no longer a culturally tolerant group of people, and we don't believe that that's something that we should stand for, especially when we recognize the disparity in the social-political influence between the Islamic and the Christian, and it's based on the perception that the religion is beyond his life himself. Why then do the Christians have an incentive to do the same for their own religion? Because we understand, and CG believes, that the religion should not be tainted by cultural norms if it contradicts their own religion value.
And be able to shift the narrative or policy making within Malaysia. Assumptions. One, she assumes that this is the end point, that there's nothing worse that the Malaysian government or the Malaysian majority can then do to make the plight of these individuals largely worse. And two, that the genesis of all antagonism has resulted because the Malaysian Christians have chosen to not compromise. This is simply disingenuous, because this is not the first policy that has been demanded on behalf of the Malaysian majority that compromises the rights of the Christian minority themselves. In terms of how churches can be designed, the fact that they cannot look like churches anymore, the fact that they must be plain auditoriums, ladies and gentlemen, it has never been an instance where this is the end point. We think it only gets worse simply because we've never in the past given them, or they've never had a reason to never want to demand more. Why do you think that will change right now? But two, we told you, the idea of antagonism, the fact that we're being antagonistic right now, in either scenario, in their model, they've conceded that, well, it may not work, well, nothing's ever going to get better, right now, so let's be defeatist about it and make sure that there's nothing that they can do. We think it's important for us to at least display to the majority that it's important for us to hold true to our beliefs, but at the same time, we do think there is hope for us to be able to change the political narrative within Malaysia themselves. That's why we tell you that the model at best is defeatist. It's concedes that nothing can be done. But we tell you what they fail to realize is it does get worse. It will, ladies and gentlemen, get worse, and we will ask people to expect more from Christian minorities if we concede that we are willing to give in to the insensitivities or be held hostage by the insensitivities of the majority crowd. And we're not willing to do that, Mike, and that's why we don't think that argument stands. The second question we're going to ask ourselves is, why is this concession something that they should never do? And this is going to be the bulk of my new material. Why? Let's realize we're talking about religion here. And what we're essentially doing here is legitimizing our religion to not just our subscribers, but our detractors as well. That the practice of my religion and belief is something that is not nearly as important that I should hold steadfast to it even in the times of tribulation. That the value of my religion in the way it governs my life is somehow less important and therefore deserves less amount of accommodation in the public atmosphere, ladies and gentlemen, and therefore which is why it will not necessarily be seen as something that can hold equal weightage. That's the problem, because we're not allowed teaching people that they must learn the ability to write or the ability to disagree among these individuals. What we are doing is telling Christians that they should then admit that their religious belief is somewhat not as important than the Muslims' belief in their own Islamic faith. And that's problematic, ladies and gentlemen, and that's something that cannot be done. One, it's harmful to the people that expect that you should hold steadfast in the times of tribulation to do what's right. But secondly, we think it's problematic because of the fact that religion is largely exclusive in nature, and people always believe that you can only subscribe to one form of religion. Your admittance that your religion is something that you need not hold valuable to your heart is a concession to someone else to berate you.
This debate is not about deciding who's right or wrong. That's a factual adjudication that none of us can determine. But when our only two options is to further the conflict or compromise, the former has failed spectacularly and resulted in destructive discourse. Why is this the way to achieve your
No, I agree. We've already decided what's right and wrong. But the point here is what's at stake is the image of my religion and how much I can prove to people that my belief in it is somewhat legitimate and something that needs to be taken seriously. And that is something that's up for compromise when you tell them that you should be able to concede, or that they should concede. And that's why we say there's something they should never do, considering what other people can pick up.
What is the real issue in today's debate? Look, after looking at open encounters and what Kana has said, we've identified that the fundamental issues that we're disagreeing on is whether or not, firstly, it is not about who is right and who is wrong in this matter, but whether or not dissenting and choosing to not budge or compromising and accepting and giving up using the name Allah is the best approach. And that is what we will be discussing today. Because after everything that Kana has talked about in his speech, you realize that he has completely missed the point and that he has not dealt with Parveen, my member of Gulf's extensions at all. He has left them standing. Right, so, a couple of rebuttals before I move on. Firstly, Kana came up and played to this rhetoric that if he played on this popular sentiment that...
Okay, clear? Our very fair visionary, Datuk Seri Najib Abdul Razak, in response to a BBC.com interview, in response to the international backlash given this problem, says that the majority can never and should never be marginalized. And that's essentially what this side of the House wants, ladies and gentlemen, to safeguard the rights of the majority to an extent that any form of opposition to some extent would then be construed to be marginalization, hence using and abusing the very notion of majoritarian view, ladies and gentlemen, especially when it imposes onto the views and the requirements of the minority. This debate is about how individuals, ladies and gentlemen, communities are held at ransom by individual sensitivities with absolutely no basis, how they're also held at ransom by the incitation of different interpretation of what a word may be, despite not having any basis, and most importantly, it's exclusive only to the Quran because it's a word that was in Arab, and that's why it's exclusively found within the Quran, right? But it's also validated by Middle Easterns, ladies and gentlemen, showing a sign of protest against this very law. It's also seen in the Malay language Bible, ladies and gentlemen, even the Sarawakian Bible, something that they didn't want to tell you, that politicians say, given that they fear a loss of popular support, say, oh no, somehow it's only exclusive within East Malaysia, but for West Malaysia, you still can't use the word Allah. That's the sort of volatility and the sort of volatility in terms of the thought process of politicians per se, ladies and gentlemen. Giving in to this magnanimous song, majority, ladies and gentlemen, is overplayed, especially when they try to overplay the very notion of religion to try and incite some form of resentment, ladies and gentlemen. And the rhetoric that came from government is clear. Oh, it's about middle ground. What middle ground when they're not meeting in the middle? Bigger man, okay, so one has to be the bigger man. They cannot rebel for the sake of rebellion and destructive discourse. That trivializes the very causation for this, ladies and gentlemen, and it validates the sort of dominance that exists, something that we don't think we should stand for. Let's move on to this idea, right? Would progression stand for conformity, or would an assertion and demand for respect create some form of progression, ladies and gentlemen? We've analyzed the conflicts that already existed with regards to the Christians and the Muslims, ladies and gentlemen, or in general, Muslims versus any other faith within Malaysia. It's a problem that's been stratified, ladies and gentlemen, and long withstanding, dictating how new churches should be built without maintaining traditional Christian structures. Abolishing Indian temples, ladies and gentlemen, forcing non-Muslim students to eat in a restroom during the times of fast. The Herald is just a portion of the very conflict that's already existed, especially when it comes to the ownership of the word. This debate is about who takes the premium and who takes the higher pedestal as to why we value religion, ladies and gentlemen. Something that Kana extensively talked to you about, how it's religious legitimacy, ladies and gentlemen, how it's about the integrity of religion. It's not just about social norms, ladies and gentlemen, because to some extent recognize that the Christians play a minor role, but it's about that value that they place onto their faith, i.e. the Christian faith versus the Muslim faith. And we don't think that you can discount that solely on the numbers game, and we think that that's offensive. But when we look at those examples that opening government talked about, how we should put halal signs, how we should not have pork served and all, it's always indicated a very biased imposition in which the minority has to always give in, and the expectation and the burden and the onus is always on the minority to give in, because he said, oh, there's no beef served and so on. But the parliament, ladies and gentlemen, the parliament grounds saw the slaughtering and the sacrificing of cows during times of the Hajj, ladies and gentlemen. We think that that's problematic. But in absence of such actions, ladies and gentlemen, this side of the house will tell you they will be perceived to be rational. No, the trend already indicated that as long as you constantly give in, you will constantly see a regression in your rights, ladies and gentlemen. And as long as you're Christian, you will always be seen wrong. Why? Because it's construed to be religious dominance, and there has to be some form of faith superiority at play. So your ultra-nationalists, ladies and gentlemen, will never give in, and they will continuously oppress as long as they can get away with it, and we've already seen in the past. So if we're picking out battles, ladies and gentlemen, the strategy is that we cannot give in to anything, especially something as baseless as this. And we think all it does is it rewards bad behavior and it promotes intolerance that already exists. Now let's look in terms of the next idea. Why should Christians act, particularly now, and whether there's hope for Christians? Before that, I'll take Parvi.
This debate is not just about the political implications of a compromise. I told you why Christians in themselves have an incentive to keep their religion unique from the cultural norms that are predominated by Islamic values in Malaysia. Why is that not relevant?
Because here's why it's relevant, right? Because when you look at a social behavioral perspective, it creates a normative view of subservience.